The Office of the Prime Minister Press Office is the primary liaison between the Fourth Estate and the Office of the Prime Minister and Cabinet.
Every day, we're working to build a more inclusive economy and a stronger, safer country.
Hear all of the latest developments as the Davis administration carries out the broad mandate of progress and change. Our live weekly press briefings provide full access to current newsmakers on the most topical issues of the day. We facilitate prompt responses from cabinet ministers on the latest reports and get answers on the issues that matter to you.
Will any penalties be levied against the
OPM Press Now, keeping you in the know. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister's weekly press briefing. Thank you to members of the media present and, of course, members of the public watching through the various media platforms. We have called this press conference this morning to discuss the tenets of proposed legislation intended to strengthen legal redress to smuggling in and through the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. There's been a lot of commentary surrounding this proposed legislation, but this morning we will present the facts on the legislation and, of course, correct some of the incorrect narratives that have been floating around surrounding this proposal. Having said that, I'm very pleased to welcome today the Attorney General, the Honorable Ryan Pinder. He is joined by the Commodore of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, Mr. Floyd Moxey, and I'd also like to acknowledge the presence and thank National Security Minister, the Honorable Wayne Munro, for his presence here today. Having said that, without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the podium Attorney General, the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. As many of you know, several weeks ago, on October 15th, a bill to strengthen our country's fight against human smuggling was tabled in the House of Assembly. The proposed legislation has been publicly available online since it was tabled. This is a practice that this administration has undertaken since the beginning. With the bill due to be debated in the coming days, discussions regarding the legislation has increased in the public domain, and we thought it might be helpful in advance of the debate to provide Bahamians with the information about the changes in the proposed bill, as well as the context and the rationales for advancing these changes. The clear and unequivocal goal of the bill is to reduce human smuggling activity in our country, and to thereby reduce the number of migrants that are in the Bahamas. By criminalizing and increasing penalties for a wide range of activities associated with smuggling, we think this bill accomplishes just that. Migrant smuggling is a heinous crime and exposes vulnerable individuals to deception, abuse, and dangerous conditions. Without a strong legal framework, criminal networks and enterprises operate with impunity, placing lives at risk and undermining our national security. The bill strengthens our ability to hold smugglers accountable, as it introduces stiff penalties for those who would exploit the vulnerable for profit. I want to be clear, under this law, if you procure false documents for migrants, if you assist with their entry into our country, if you help them pass through our country, if your boat or your plane is used to transport them, if you hide them, if you help them stay here in this country, if you facilitate or benefit from human smuggling in any way whatsoever, you will be more likely to face criminal prosecution and more likely to suffer significantly harsher consequences when this bill is passed. Every individual who seeks to profit from human suffering and smuggling while endangering our country and endangering our people should know that the odds that engaging in their smuggling business will ruin their lives are about to increase dramatically. New penalties include fines of up to $300,000 and prison sentences of up to 15 years for violation of this new law. Until now, prosecutors pursuing smuggling charges have been forced to patch together different provisions from the Penal Code, the Immigration Act, and our customs laws, this new law closes those gaps, closes the loopholes on prosecutions, and provides a clearer and more robust set of rules to establish illegality and to increase punishment for this heinous crime. Strengthening and updating the tools we use to better fight criminal networks is something we've had to do nearly continually through our history of our country. Our country occupies not only the most beautiful stretch of ocean in the world, but one of the most strategic. For at least 500 years, these hundreds of thousands of square miles that we call our archipelago and our waters have included vital shipping routes, linking peoples, linking nations, and linking empires. The same geography that makes us a critical corridor for legitimate trade and legitimate travel has also made us vulnerable to illicit activity. With more than 700 islands and keys and hundreds of thousands of miles of territory, with such a small population and such limited resources as a jurisdiction, we can recognize that surveillance and enforcement have long been a challenge for us. But all Bahamians should know that we have made historic progress in recent years under our Prime Minister's leadership. He has prioritized substantial investments in new technology, in surveillance and enforcement assets, in robust recruitment, professional training, and in strengthening our critical partnerships. I note that the Prime Minister has skillfully strengthened our strategic and operational partnerships while still standing up for our sovereignty on the international stage. At the 2022 Summit of the Americas that was held in Los Angeles, our Prime Minister resisted considerable pressure to sign a declaration that 20 other countries in our region did in fact sign, because he insisted that our country, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, could not bear the burden of accepting migrants or refugees. The progress we're making now is the result of great effort and coordination and calibration. The Commodore and the Commissioner and the men and women in which they lead have made the most of their expanded capabilities and significantly strengthened our borders. We have seen, for example, a dramatic increase in the apprehension of smugglers and migrants before they make landfall in the Bahamas. It is notable that our gains have come even as economic, political, and humanitarian crises in Haiti, Cuba, and Venezuela have led in recent years to an extraordinary number of their citizens attempting to flee their countries, with many attempting to reach the United States of America via our waters. This brings us to another critical reason for this new bill. The new bill improves our capacity to partner with the Trump administration and the United States, and with other regional partners. This includes new ways via protocols to share information quickly about smugglers and suspicious boats. It allows for clear legal authority for our officers to work with partners at sea, including on foreign flagged vessels. And it also provides guidance on how our defense force and police can safely stop, check, and even take control of boats when smuggling is suspected, even outside our own waters in some circumstances. The passage of this bill will put us among respected international partners, like the United States and other nations, who recognize the urgency of addressing the crime collectively and responsibly, and will both strengthen our national response and our global partnerships and standing in the world on this issue. Smugglers work across borders, that's what they do. So law enforcement also has to work across borders. This new law makes it easier to team up, share evidence, and run joint patrols with our partners for this specific purpose. As I conclude, I want to address some concerns that have been raised. I know some Bahamians are asking, what does this mean for our country? Are the rights of migrants changing as a result of this piece of legislation? These are fair questions, and they deserve clear and fair answers. The bill we tabled did not give migrants any new right to enter the Bahamas. No new right to remain in the Bahamas or to receive any legal status in the Bahamas. It did not take away any power that we have under our Immigration Act to arrest, to detain, to charge, or to remove people who are on breach of our laws and who are in the country illegally. The purpose of the bill is not to change who is allowed to stay. Its purpose is to give us sharper tools to go after criminal smugglers who profit from exploiting desperate people and who add to the number of people in our country without a legal right to be here. That's what the bill does. The bill does make clear that migrants should not be treated as smugglers under the law, just because they are on the same boat. Without more evidence, we would not charge a migrant with smuggling. But we can still detain, charge under immigration offenses that exist, and deport in accordance with our existing immigration laws. Nothing in this bill removes or weakens those powers of the state. The bill says that migrants are entitled to humane treatment. They're entitled to safety, dignity, and non-refoulement. That means not sending people directly back into serious harm. This has caused some people to ask whether new rights are being created. And it's a fair question. But this is not the case. To reiterate, these provisions do not give anyone a right to be granted status or remain in the Bahamas. What they do is say that when we intercept a vessel or process a group of migrants, our officers must ensure, one, that people are not subjected to inhumane or degrading treatment. Secondly, that vulnerable persons, and this includes children, this includes pregnant women, this includes people with serious medical conditions, are identified and they're handled with the appropriate care. And that returns and repatriations are carried out in an orderly and a safe manner. The bill does say that. But this is not about changing who can stay. It's about how our officers will conduct themselves while enforcing the law of the land. We can enforce our laws without abandoning our basic humanity on the high seas or in our detention facilities. That balance is not new in the country. It has been the practice of our defense force and our other uniformed servicemen for years in this country. It's not a new practice. The legal guidance we received is that this articulation of how migrants should be treated, which is consistent with the obligations that already exist in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, does not grant any new rights, nor does it grant any new entitlements. But we understand that the concerns that it does are sincere. We don't fault Bahamians for having questions and concerns. This is not difficult to address. In fact, we're looking at amendments to the bill to remove the ambiguity that Bahamians may think exists, because we firmly are of the position that this doesn't change what we do today. We all pray that conditions in other countries are going to improve and that the flow of migration and illegal migration slows from country to country. But while we pray for the best, we prepare for the worst. And that includes not only expanding our technical and resource capacity, but strengthening our laws so we can better prosecute and punish those participating or assisting in any way with terrible crimes associated with human smuggling. The bill provides stronger tools for law enforcement and harsher penalties for criminals. If you want fewer people in the country illegally, you will want to support this piece of legislation. I want to thank you for the opportunity to bring remarks. I think we will hear from the Commodore next, and then we'll be open for some questions.
Good afternoon, all. So I will provide an overview of the Royal Bahamas Defense Forces operation as they relate to human smuggling. Human smuggling remains a persistent challenge that militaries and Coast Guard across the world continue to grapple with, and the Bahamas is no exception. We are blessed because of our geographic proximity to major maritime routes, and at times it feels like a burden. Nonetheless, our nation sits in a prime location for the movement of people, vessels, and commodities across our waters. Now, while the legitimate flow of goods contributes to our economic stability, there are those who seek to exploit our maritime domain for illegal financial gain and other illicit activities. For this reason, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force has strategically positioned assets throughout the archipelago. In Abaco, we have reinstated the small boat capability. We maintain vessel stations in Grand Bahama and Bimini, and our satellite bases stretch throughout the chain of islands down to our southernmost outpost in Great Inagua. These deployments are further strengthened by partnership with our international allies, allowing us to co-locate small boats stationed with advanced maritime radar systems. This integration is well underway and is a significant step in improving maritime domain awareness and maritime domain control across the thousands of square miles of open ocean that the Royal Bahamas Defense Force police every day. Even with all available technology and intelligence, perpetrators continue to attempt to exploit our vast and complex waterways. Over the last 5 years, spanning 2021 to today's date, December 4th, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force has interdicted or assisted in the interdiction of 344 vessels that were involved in migrant or smuggling-related activity. From those interdictions, 11,791 migrants were apprehended and handed over to the relevant authorities. It is critical to highlight that these figures reflect maritime interdictions only. They do not include additional joint land-based operations carried out alongside the Bahamas Department of Immigration. Of the 344 total interdiction, 181 involved vessels inbound to the Bahamas, and they were primarily Haitian and Cuban migrant vessels traveling from south and the west. These accounted for 8,114 migrants apprehended, of which 6,545 were Haitian nationals. Additionally, 163 vessels were interdicted while attempted to depart and or have departed the Bahamas en route to the United States. These smuggling attempts typically originate from our northern islands, Bimini and Grand Bahama. Over the past 5 years, 3,677 migrants of mixed nationalities were apprehended, including Haitians, Cubans, Jamaicans, Dominicans, Ecuadorians, and Chinese nationals, among others. Intelligence assessments consistently indicate that many of these individuals entered the Bahamas legally, but later pay up to $10,000 for the last mile phase of their illegal journey to be smuggled into the United States. Now, just yesterday, December the 3rd, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force disrupted a suspected human smuggling attempt believed to be destined for the United States. Through a coordinated surveillance and patrol effort here in New Providence, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Harbor Patrol Unit intercepted a vessel in the area of John Alfred Dock with 8 persons on board. one American male identified himself as the captain. The passengers included 4 Ecuadorian males, 2 Ecuadorian females, and 1 Dominican male. The individuals and the vessel were turned over to the appropriate authorities for further investigation relating to failure to clear customs and immigration, overstaying, and suspected involvement in human smuggling. This interdiction reflects the continued vigilance of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the strong cooperation we maintain with local and our international partners. Every successful disruption represents a life potentially saved, a criminal network weakened, and a reaffirmation of our duty to protect our nation. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force remains steadfastly committed to defending the Bahamas, preserving its territorial integrity, and securing our maritime borders. Human smuggling is a dynamic and evolving threat, but through strategic deployment, advanced technology, interagency collaboration, and the dedication of our men and women in uniform, we continue to suppress these illegal operations and safeguard the people of the Bahamas. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General, and thank you, Commodore, for those very comprehensive remarks. We now welcome questions, and I'd ask the relevant presenter to mount the podium. Questions, please.
My first question is, I know you said earlier in your speech that there's amendments or changes hopefully for ambiguities to be removed, those language. Can you be specific what ambiguities you want to clear up in the, bills or languages for Bahamians?
Well, there's two ambiguities that we hear being discussed in the public domain that are, not a part of this bill, but we would want to ensure that language demonstrates that. The first is that this removes any other prosecutorial rights that exist. It's clear that in the bill and in the Section 11, which is what those who are querying the subject refer to, in my opinion, it's clear that it says that all other criminal activities are subject to the criminal laws of the Bahamas. We could put in a clarifying statement on that. The second misconception that we want to address, and it may just be with some clarifying language, is that this bill provides no further rights on migrants to be able to stay in the Bahamas. All of the procedures of, current procedures of immigration enforcement remain, of residency applications remain, if they are applicable. All of those stay in place, and nothing changes as a result of this bill to have people have the ability to remain in the country that they didn't have before. And so those are really the two misconceptions that I hear in the public domain being discussed. I also think it was summed up rather succinctly by really, it was the editor from the Nassau Guardian, if you read the editorial today in the Guardian, who we know is no shrill for the government, in how she describes the bill and the relevance of the bill and its application and intended application. I thought it was a fantastic summary, and I encourage everybody to go read that editorial as well.
So could you pinpoint scenarios where flaws in the existing laws could cause human smugglers to over prosecution?
So I think the Commodore did a very good job when he presented the recent interdiction that was done, I think earlier this week, Commodore, you referenced, where those were turned over for illegal entry violations and failure to clear under the Customs Act. So when you hear me say we piece together pieces and other pieces of legislation to try to create to come up with a criminal offense for this activity, those are the types of provisions that we look in the Immigration Act and the Customs Management Act, and then some in the Penal Code. But we clearly miss the true intent of what is happening. which is the illegal enterprise, criminal enterprise, of smuggling of migrants across borders. That is not succinctly dealt with in our legislation, and it's about time we do. My prosecutors from the DPP tell me, and have told me, Ryan, this needs reform. We don't have the legislative tools to prosecute like we should for the scale and the type of crime that is being committed. So it's only our duty as a responsible government to provide the legislative tools in a criminal prosecution framework for crime to be prosecuted effectively in this country, and that's what we're doing with this bill.
So let's go back to 2022 when there was a deadly boating accident, right? I think 17 Haitian nationals died. 4 men were charged with manslaughter. Let's just say this bill was passed in that instant. Well, let's just say this piece of legislation was passed at the time it was in place. Aside from manslaughter, what other charges would be levied against those 4 men?
Well, you would have seen, you see the charges in the bill for boat captains and for boat owners and for active smuggling, and the time frames that are attributable to that. I'm not sure if there were women, pregnant women or children on that capsize. And so now you have the enhanced penalties of having vulnerable persons involved in this criminal enterprise, and the prosecution of that would be much more succinct and much more pointed than having to go through only a manslaughter charge, and then if you didn't prevail on the manslaughter charge, you didn't have an acceptable smuggling charge to pursue with hefty fines. And if you look at the bill, you have what we call aggravated activities, are transporting vulnerable persons, but also transporting more than 10 persons. You know, all of these criteria are aggravating circumstances under the current bill, which gives you enhanced penalties. And so the prosecution of that would have been much more swift. We would have clear charges to bring with very serious penalties that are imposed.
I have a question, just switching gears a little bit. We want to talk about the fine to the barge that run around.
Before we address ancillary questions, are there any other questions on this piece of legislation?
Did the government expect this much pushback to this legislation?
You know, you don't really know until you get it, right? I mean, Bahamians having honest questions about the legislation is fair game. We're a government. We govern the country on behalf of the Bahamian people. We advance matters and policies that we think are in the best interest of our people and our country. Certainly, if Bahamians have questions about that, we don't shy away from that. And it's their right to have questions about provisions. Look, reading legislation also is difficult, right? I mean, it's very technical. And so to be able to hear the questions that Bahamians have and then come to them and explain the government's position on those questions, I think is just natural democracy.
Why they're seemingly giving some persons the benefit of the doubt, right? Members of the Coalition of Independents protested yesterday, and some of your counterparts argue that it's pretty much misinformation.
I argued it was misinformation.
Do you see that's not? Or them having honest questions or honest concerns?
Oh, if they have honest questions, we're happy to answer them. I mean, I think whatever questions are in the public domain, whether it be from them or others, we've attempted today to address those questions. And I think that's the responsible thing to do.
I think one of the concerns the Coalition of Independents had, they talked about this asylum thing, and you spoke about humanitarian response that needs to be shown to these migrants. Their whole concern is that does this humanitarian cost come to the cost of Bahamian taxpayers? And they say they don't have a problem with the other parts of the bill. They believe that part is being ignored. How do you respond to that?
So the humanitarian elements that I spelled out in my contribution earlier are basic human rights and frankly are matters that the Defense Force and our armed services entail every day. If there is a pregnant woman, regardless of migrant status, it's a responsible thing to give them proper care, right? If you're injured, it's the responsible thing to get proper care. If you have a child who is without their guardians or parents, it's the responsible thing as a child, as having a minor who has no parent, to provide them the proper care under the existing law of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. So it doesn't create any new law with respect to that. With the questions on asylum, this is not an asylum bill. This does not contain any enhanced rights to asylum that don't already exist in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We have asylum applications for years in this country. This isn't something new. We have a refugee unit within the Department of Immigration that addresses asylum applications. And in fact, that unit is responsible for interviewing migrants that are caught or come to this country to see if there are any grounds, right? So that is standard operating procedure for many years now in this country, regardless of administration, right? Those are obligations that the Bahamas have as a function of being a member of the United Nations, just like every other country in the world, right? So that's nothing new. This bill does nothing to expand, to add to, or to encourage any determination of asylum in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. In fact, I think the refugee unit in the Department of Immigration does an outstanding job. More than 70% of the applications are actually denied because they have a lack of grounds, right? Denied even initial consideration because there's a lack of grounds. There's an assessment done. This is a professional undertaking, right? This isn't ad hoc. This isn't something where anybody can file a request for asylum and get it and stay. That's not the laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. This does not change that procedure. It absolutely has nothing to do with that, right? And so I'm glad you asked the question because it gives me the opportunity to address that misconception. The asylum in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is as it has been for many, many, many years, and this bill does nothing to do to change that, nothing to give more empowerment to it, nothing to encourage applications for it, and nothing to encourage the refugee unit to give a different consideration to requests than they currently give.
The barge.
Are there any other questions on this bill?
Just one more, Attorney General. Attorney General, has there been any pressure put on this administration to create this legislation by any foreign government?
No. This is the responsible thing to do. My prosecutors tell me it's the responsible thing to do. The Minister of National Security advises it's the responsible thing to do. And his armed services under his portfolio, including the Defense Force, understand and advocate that it's a responsible thing to do because there is criminal enterprise in our country that we do not have the proper laws in place today to give maximum protection from. And it's our responsibility to put that in place.
This is my last question on the barge. The 20K fine that's supposed to be levied on this company, but many environmentalists and Bahamians feel like that is too low. We had John Pinder in the House saying there should be more. Is there anything more on the books that this company could be facing besides that?
So you would recall earlier in our administration, I think it was earlier this year, maybe it was last year, we passed amendments to the Environmental Planning and Protection Act, which actually put a framework of spot fines in place. DEP had no authority for spot fines before our administration made that amendment. So what you would have to do in that case is you would have to go to court, frequently under criminal prosecution matters, under the Environmental Planning and Protection Act, to get a determination against those who harm the environment before you can have really any fiscal penalty enforcement power. What we did in this with our amendment is we provided spot fines by the agency. So when they see a environmental violation, they can fine you right away. So there's at least some instant penalty. And then we pursue, alternatively, or in addition, the provisions under the Environmental Planning and Protection Act where we would have to now go and enforce certain matters in court as well. So the spot fine isn't the only fine. It's an immediate reaction that the department has now an empowerment to do. And then we proceed under further prosecution once we understand the damages to the environment, to the reef, and then we monetize that, and then we prosecute.
So for further assessments, how much more money could this company face in addition to 20K?
Well, I don't know until the assessments are done, right?
What do you say to the owners that feel like they shouldn't pay any fines because they today called piracy, all of the goods. What do you make to them that feel they shouldn't pay fine after what happened to their barge?
One has nothing to do with the other. One is a private action by private individuals who were contrary to the law, and the second one is an enforcement and regulatory matter by the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And so they're unrelated, so they could say what they want, but they're frankly unrelated. Any questions left for me? One more?
Update on the Freedom of Information Act. I know earlier this year we would have said we were working on the implementation plan, and we would have hoped that by the end of the year we would have gotten that enacted. So where are we now?
Well, we're right where we were. We're working on the implementation plan. Thank you.
Also, finally, if you could quickly, what's the update on the anti-gang legislation? I know that was a piece of legislation that the administration has been before. There were concerns, I mean, from your fellow colleague right there, right, that we shouldn't rush the legislation to avoid loopholes being taken advantage of. Well, where are we with that?
I don't think that was the position of the Minister of National Security. I think the position of the Minister of National Security was because this is a new regime and there are components in this that the police force themselves had to have internal exposure and training and to be able to formulate charges under the anti-gang. I think if you listen to the Commissioner of Police, I think it was maybe a month or two ago, they are preparing to pursue certain charges under the piece of legislation. But it was a new piece of legislation with new elements of proof, new evidence that needs to be put forward to be able to bring the charges. And so that whole process has been underway and working diligently through the Commissioner of Police. Thank you very much. Anything for the Commodore?
Well, thank you very much, Attorney General Pinder, Commodore Moxie, and thank you very much for your presence here, Minister Monroe. That brings our press briefing to a close. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good afternoon.